"Remove your uniform, Sergeant." The words sliced through the air like a command meant to crush. She stood her ground, 180 soldiers watching, waiting for her to crack. They expected shame, they expected submission, but when she unbuttoned her blouse and exposed the ink on her shoulder, the commander froze, his eyes widened, his breath caught. Because that tattoo wasn't just a mark, it was a warning. A ghost from the Black Files staring him in the face. Who sent her? Why was she really there? And why did her silence speak louder than any rank? You're watching Veteran Biker. Tell us where you're tuning in from and drop a comment below. Like, subscribe. Stay for the story that no one dared to tell. Until now. The sun beat down on Camp Crimson Ridge, a relentless hammer on the arid earth. Dust motes danced in the shimmering heat above the asphalt, disturbed only by the low rumble of a military bus pulling to a stop. From its shadowed interior, Staff Sergeant Jade Navarro descended, her combat boots hitting the ground with a precise, almost silent thud. She was an anomaly in a world built on rigid convention, a singular figure stepping into what was unequivocally an elite all-male combat unit. Her presence immediately shifted the camp's equilibrium, a subtle but undeniable tremor. Every head turned. 180 pairs of eyes, sharp and assessing, fixed on her. They were the eyes of seasoned soldiers, men forged in the crucible of countless drills and, for many, actual combat. Their gazes were not welcoming, they were loaded with suspicion, with a silent collective skepticism that hung heavy in the stifling air. Whispers, barely audible but keenly felt, snaked through the ranks. Diversity higher, the unspoken accusation seemed to echo in the space between the barracks and the parade ground. It was a label she knew well, one she had faced before, and one she dismissed with an almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. Her uniform was impeccable, creased to a knife edge, her movements economical and self-assured. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had faced down far greater challenges than the collective disdain of an unwelcoming unit. Her posture was ramrod straight, her expression a mask of professional calm, betraying no hint of the undercurrents swirling around her. She was early 30s, her face unlined but with an intensity in her dark eyes that hinted at deep reservoirs of experience. She wasn't here to prove anything to them, not in the way they expected. She was here for a different purpose, one far removed from their petty judgments. A figure emerged from the command building, casting a long shadow across the parade ground. Colonel Ronan Beckett, a man in his mid-50s, was the embodiment of old-school command. His uniform was crisp, his bearing military perfection, but his face was set in an unyielding mask of disapproval. He moved with the stiff, deliberate gait of a man who believed in order, in tradition, and in an established hierarchy that, in his view, had no room for deviation. He stopped a few feet from Jade, his eyes the color of cold steel sweeping over her. There was no welcome in them, no handshake extended, only a glacial detachment that spoke volumes. His silence was more cutting than any reprimand. "Staff Sergeant Navarro," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly tone that carried across the hushed assembly. It wasn't a greeting, merely an acknowledgement of her rank and name, devoid of warmth or courtesy. "Welcome to Camp Crimson Ridge. Your quarters have been assigned. Report to your section leader, Master Sergeant Reyes, at 0700 tomorrow." He didn't wait for a response, didn't offer further instruction. With a curt nod that was less a gesture of respect and more a dismissal, he turned and re-entered the command building, leaving Jade standing alone in the unforgiving sun, the silent judgment of the entire unit bearing down on her. It was a calculated move, designed to isolate, to intimidate, to make her feel the weight of their collective disapproval from the very first moment. But Jade didn't flinch. She simply met their gazes, one by one, with an unreadable calm, before turning and marching with unwavering purpose toward the barracks, her every step an assertion of her right to be there. The week that followed was a grueling initiation, though not in the way one might expect. Jade performed flawlessly in every task assigned. On the firing range, her shots found their marks with chilling precision, groups tighter than any other shooter. During tactical exercises, her understanding of terrain and strategy was intuitive, her movements fluid and decisive. In physical conditioning, she pushed past the limits of many of her male counterparts, her endurance seemingly boundless. Yet she remained an outsider. Her interactions were minimal, her words few. She spoke only when necessary, offering crisp, concise answers to direct questions, never volunteering information, never seeking camaraderie. Her silence was a shield, but also, to those who watched closely, an enigma. The men of Camp Crimson Ridge, accustomed to boisterous camaraderie and clear hierarchies, found her unreadable. She didn't complain, didn't boast, didn't react to the subtle slights or the overt stares. She simply existed and performed with an almost machine-like efficiency that was both admirable and unsettling. Some attempted to provoke a reaction, a flicker of emotion, but found only the same serene, focused intensity. It only intensified the whispers, the theories about her presence here. She was a test, she was a token, she was a problem. As the week drew to a close, a sense of quiet tension permeated the camp. The unspoken challenge of her presence had festered, waiting for an opportunity to boil over. Colonel Beckett, observing from his office window, saw the lingering unease, the simmering resentment among his men. He saw an opportunity to reassert his authority, to put this unusual situation to an end, or at least to put her firmly in her place. On Friday morning, just as the sun began its ascent, painting the sky in fiery hues, Beckett's voice boomed over the camp's loudspeakers, cutting through the morning stillness. "Attention all personnel! Mandatory outdoor uniform inspection at 0900. Full combat dress. Assemble on the main parade ground." The announcement was unexpected. Uniform inspections were a regular occurrence, but a mandatory outdoor inspection in full combat dress under the rapidly escalating heat of the sun felt punitive, a deliberate act designed to test patience and endurance. By 0900, the parade ground was a sea of olive green and camouflage. 180 soldiers stood in rigid formation, sweat already beading on their brows, the weight of their combat gear pressing down on them. Colonel Beckett, flanked by his senior officers, including Master Sergeant Malcolm Reyes, surveyed the ranks with an air of grim satisfaction. His gaze swept over the men, pausing momentarily on Jade Navarro, who stood at attention, her posture as unyielding as polished steel. Beckett began his inspection, moving slowly down the lines, his eyes scrutinizing every detail: weapon cleanliness, boot polish, the precise alignment of insignia. He issued terse corrections, his voice sharp, his demeanor unyielding. The tension mounted with each passing minute, the air growing thick with unspoken anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't just about uniform regulations. This was about something else entirely. Finally, he stopped in front of Jade. His silence stretched, palpable and heavy. He examined her from head to toe, his eyes lingering on her combat blouse, then her name tag, then her unblinking eyes. The other soldiers shifted subtly, their attention acutely focused on the interaction, a collective breath held. They sensed the coming storm. Staff Sergeant Navarro, Beckett's voice finally cut through the silence, sharp and deliberate. "Your combat blouse." Jade remained expressionless. "Sir?" "Remove it," Beckett commanded. his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. Under Uniform Regulation 3.4, excessive layering in temperate climates during outdoor inspections can be deemed a fire hazard and an impediment to immediate combat readiness. Remove your combat blouse. A gasp rippled through the ranks, quickly stifled. The air crackled with shock and disbelief. Uniform Regulation 3.4 was a rarely invoked obscure clause, typically reserved for extreme heat conditions or very specific equipment checks. To invoke it here, now specifically for her, was a transparent act of humiliation. Every soldier on that parade ground understood the intent behind the order. It wasn't about regulation, it was about public shaming. It was about breaking her, about making her an example, about forcing her to expose herself in front of an entire all-male unit. The silence that followed was absolute, weighted with the raw tension of a moment teetering on the edge of explosion. Jade's expression remained unchanged, her eyes unwavering. There was no flicker of anger, no hint of embarrassment, no trace of fear. It was as if the order, designed to strip her of her dignity, had no effect on her at all. Her hands moved, steady and precise, unbuttoning the front of her combat blouse. One button, then the next, then the next. Each movement was deliberate, calm, almost defiant in its sheer lack of emotion. She unbuttoned it fully, then, with the same unhurried grace, she slipped it off her shoulders, letting it fall to her side. She stood there, in her olive-green undershirt, the fabric clinging slightly to her frame in the oppressive heat. The sun glinted off the faint sheen of sweat on her skin, and then it was visible. Clearly, unmistakably on her right shoulder, revealed to all. A dark, precise tattoo. It was an image of stunning detail, an eagle, wings spread wide, diving with an almost predatory grace. 3 arrows were clutched in its talons, pointing downwards, sharp and lethal. The entire image was encircled by a series of cryptic numbers, intricately woven into the design, numbers that held no obvious meaning to the untrained eye, but hinted at a deeper, hidden significance. The artwork was stark, powerful, and unmistakably professional, not the kind of tattoo one picked up on a whim. Colonel Beckett, who had been watching her with an almost predatory satisfaction, froze. The words died on his tongue. His eyes, initially narrowed in triumph, widened almost imperceptibly as they fixed on the mark. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, surprise, recognition, perhaps even a nascent trace of fear. He took an involuntary step back, his carefully constructed composure cracking. The ripple of shock that had passed through the soldiers at his command to remove her blouse was nothing compared to the collective intake of breath that now swept through the ranks. Whispers far more urgent and laden with a new kind of caution began to spread. Black Warden, the name, hushed and reverent, traveled like wildfire. Some recognized the distinct iconography, the impossible precision of the mark. Others had only heard the rumors, the legends of a unit so clandestine, so effective, that its existence was almost mythical. They spoke of operatives who moved in shadows, who completed missions deemed impossible, and who simply vanished when their work was done. Jade Navarro, the quiet, unassuming staff sergeant, the supposed diversity hire, now stood before them, a living testament to that legend. The tattoo wasn't just a mark on her skin, it was a brand of unparalleled skill, of unimaginable trials, of a past that utterly dwarfed their petty resentments and their commander's attempts at humiliation. The air, already heavy with heat, now thrummed with a different kind of energy, an electrifying realization that swept through every man present. The power dynamic, only moments ago so clearly defined, had shattered, and in its place something entirely new, entirely unexpected, had begun to emerge. The silence on the parade ground was profound, a living entity that pressed down on every soldier, every officer. It wasn't merely the absence of sound, it was the cessation of breath, the suspension of thought, as 180 pairs of eyes fixed on the dark, precise tattoo etched onto Staff Sergeant Jade Navarro's right shoulder. The eagle, wings spread wide in a predatory dive, 3 arrows clutched in its talons, circled by those cryptic numbers. It was an unmistakable signature. It was the mark of the Black Warden. Colonel Ronan Beckett, a man whose composure was legendary, remained frozen. His jaw, usually set in a rigid line of command, was slack. The meticulous order he had so carefully cultivated within Camp Crimson Ridge had been irrevocably shattered by a single, indelible piece of art. His face, moments before a canvas of stern authority, now betrayed a startling cocktail of shock and a nascent, unsettling recognition. He knew the mark, or rather, he knew of it, as did every high-ranking officer in the military. It was the stuff of whispers, of classified briefings, of legends traded in hushed tones over secure lines. The Black Warden unit was not officially acknowledged, yet its reputation for impossible feats, for ghost-like efficiency, preceded it, a shadow entity that operated beyond the conventional reach of military command. Jade, however, remained impassive. She stood there, her combat blouse draped over one arm, her undershirt clinging lightly to her, utterly unaffected by the sudden shift in atmosphere. There was no defiance in her stance, no smug satisfaction, just the same quiet, unwavering calm that had defined her since her arrival. Her gaze, direct and unblinking, swept over the stunned faces of the soldiers, then briefly, almost imperceptibly, met Beckett's. In that fleeting connection there was no challenge, only an acknowledgement of the truth that now stood revealed. The whispers, which had started as hushed ripples of Black Warden, grew into a low hum, a current of awe and incredulity that surged through the formation. Soldiers nudged one another, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and respect. Some had heard the names, seen the fleeting, redacted reports. Others had only listened to the campfire tales, the apocryphal stories of operatives who could vanish into thin air, complete missions single-handedly, and emerge unscathed from the deadliest conflicts. Now, one of them stood before them, a living, breathing testament to those myths. The silence had become unbearable, thick with the weight of revelation. Then, from the front rank, a figure stepped forward. Master Sergeant Malcolm Reyes. He was a man of few words, a grizzled veteran with a presence as solid and unyielding as granite. His face was etched with the lines of countless campaigns, his eyes holding the weary wisdom of a soldier who had seen too much. He moved with a deliberate slowness, his gaze fixed not on Jade's face but on her shoulder, on the intricate design that had stunned them all. He stopped a few feet from her, his movements drawing every eye. Slowly, deliberately, Reyes reached up, unbuttoning the cuff of his own combat blouse. He then rolled up his right sleeve, revealing a forearm scarred by time and service. And there, faded by years of sun and countless missions, was another tattoo. It was the same eagle, the same 3 arrows, the same cryptic numbers. But where Jade's was dark and sharp, Reyes's was a ghost of its former self, softened by the passage of time, a faint echo of the power it once represented. A collective gasp, louder this time, swept through the ranks. The hum of whispers died completely. The revelation of one Black Warden operative was shocking enough. The presence of 2, confirmed by an established, respected figure like Reyes, was shattering. Reyes didn't speak a word. He didn't need to. He simply held out his arm, aligning his faded tattoo with Jade's crisp, stark one. It was a silent, irrefutable confirmation. His gaze, usually so stoic, held a flicker of something profound as he looked from his arm to Jade's shoulder, then finally to her eyes. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of a shared, extraordinary past. Colonel Beckett, still reeling, watched the silent exchange. The color had drained from his face. The casual arrogance, the cold detachment he had projected, had vanished. He was visibly shaken, his rigid posture now seeming to waver. This was beyond his scope, beyond his control. This was not a staff sergeant, this was a force, an entity with ties to a world he only understood in abstract, official capacities. Without a single word, Beckett raised a hand, a gesture of absolute immediate dismissal. Inspection concluded. His voice was rough, uncharacteristically strained. "Return to your duties." The order, abrupt and unexpected, broke the spell. Soldiers, still reeling from the shock, shuffled awkwardly, turning to disperse. They moved with a newfound deference, their eyes darting back to Jade with a mixture of awe and unease. The shift in power was palpable, a tangible weight in the air. Only moments ago, she had been the outsider, the target of disdain. Now, she was an enigma, a legend made flesh, and her presence commanded an entirely different kind of respect, the kind born of fear and grudging admiration for a force they could not comprehend, let alone challenge. Jade, still silent, rebuttoned her combat blouse with the same measured movements she had used to remove it. She didn't hurry, didn't gloat. She simply reassembled her uniform, a quiet act that seemed to underscore her unyielding control in a situation that had spiraled wildly out of Beckett's control. She gave Master Sergeant Reyes a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, a silent communication that spoke volumes about their shared history. Reyes, in turn, nodded back, a flicker of something akin to pride in his grizzled eyes before he too turned to disperse with the other officers. The immediate aftermath was a strange, charged calm. The camp, usually a hive of activity and boisterous chatter, was subdued. The news of the tattoo and Reyes's confirmation spread like wildfire, mutating into countless theories and whispered legends. Jade Navarro was no longer just a staff sergeant. She was the Black Warden, the silent operative, the ghost. Her name, once spoken with disdain, was now uttered with a cautious respect, tinged with a healthy dose of fear. Every drill, every training exercise took on a new dimension. Soldiers watched her, not to mock or dismiss, but to study. They observed her unparalleled marksmanship, her fluid tactical movements, her seemingly boundless endurance. She continued to outperform, to excel, to set a standard that most could only aspire to, all without speaking a word more than necessary. Her performance became her language, her silent demonstration of competence far more eloquent than any boast. The shooting range, once a place where soldiers competed loudly, became a place of quiet observation when Jade was present. Her shots, tight and precise, seemed to whisper lessons to those who watched. During the brutal endurance runs through the rugged terrain surrounding Crimson Ridge, she would often finish ahead of the pack, her breathing steady, her face impassive as others gasped for air. She ran with a fluid, almost effortless grace, as if the grueling pace was merely a brisk walk. Her physical prowess, now amplified by the revelation of her past, seemed to redefine the very limits of human capability for the men who witnessed it. In tactical briefings, where she had once been largely ignored or given token attention, officers now listened intently when she did speak, even if it was only a single sharp observation that cut through convoluted plans to the core of an issue. Her insights were always practical, always precise, always aimed at the most efficient and effective outcome. She did not waste words, and her economy of language made her contributions even more impactful. Yet, despite her undeniable competence and the newfound respect, she remained an enigma. Her silence, once a barrier, was now a source of endless fascination. What had she seen? What had she done? The tattoo was not merely a symbol of belonging, It was a testament to a life lived on the fringes of military operations, a life shrouded in secrecy and danger. The cryptic numbers in particular sparked endless speculation. Were they dates, coordinates, codes? No one dared ask her directly. Her aura, once dismissed as aloofness, now felt like an impenetrable fortress. The power dynamic between Jade and Colonel Beckett continued its quiet yet profound shift. Beckett, a man who had prided himself on absolute control, found himself in an unfamiliar position. He could not dismiss her. He could not ignore her. Her presence was a constant, unsettling reminder of a world beyond his traditional command, a world that commanded respect, even fear, from the highest echelons of military power. He began to observe her more closely, a flicker of grudging admiration beginning to replace his initial contempt. He wouldn't admit it, not even to himself, but he was starting to see that her performance transcended the need for conversation, for explanation. It simply was. Master Sergeant Reyes, on the other hand, carried himself with a quiet pride in Jade's presence. He didn't overtly intervene on her behalf, nor did he need to. His simple act of revealing his own faded tattoo had been the ultimate endorsement, a silent declaration that had instantly elevated her status. He would sometimes offer her a brief, almost imperceptible nod when their paths crossed, a gesture of camaraderie that only those two could truly understand. He knew the weight of the mark, the silent burden and honor it carried. He also knew that Jade was not here for personal glory, but for something far deeper. The legend of the Black Warden tattoo grew with each passing day. It was spoken of in the mess hall, in the barracks. During long, exhausting drills, soldiers debated its meaning, its origins, the impossible missions it represented. The unit, once an obscure myth, now felt tangibly close, embodied by the quiet staff sergeant who moved among them. She was a living legend, walking proof that some stories, no matter how unbelievable, were true. And Jade, through it all, continued her quiet work. She wasn't seeking validation or approval. She wasn't seeking redemption for a past she never regretted. She was observing, she was assessing, she was searching. Her request for this assignment to a conventional training base had been deliberate. It wasn't about proving herself to a group of skeptical soldiers or a resistant commander. It was about something far more significant, a legacy. She understood that the true strength of any military lay not in its weapons or its strategies, but in the quality of its leaders. And in a world rapidly changing, where conflict was evolving, the next generation of leaders needed more than just conventional training. They needed something forged in the crucible of unexpected challenges, in the quiet fire of true character. She wasn't here to simply lead. She was here to cultivate. To seek out those worthy of becoming the architects of the future, those who possess the quiet strength, the unwavering integrity, the silent fire that could ignite true leadership. She was here to rebuild a broken system from within, not with a bang, but with the subtle, profound force of her presence and the undeniable truth of her past, now laid bare for all to see. The tattoo had stunned them. Now her purpose would reshape them. The revelation of Jade Navarro's Black Warden tattoo and Master Sergeant Reyes's silent corroboration had fundamentally altered the ecosystem of Camp Crimson Ridge. The initial shock had given way to a pervasive, almost reverent awe, tinged with an undercurrent of disquiet. No one dared to openly question her past, nor did they need to. The tattoo spoke volumes, a narrative of elite clandestine operations that dwarfed their own conventional military experiences. Jade, however, remained untouched by the shifting tides of perception. She continued her routine with unwavering consistency, her movements precise, her presence a study in quiet intensity. If the sudden shift in respect registered with her, she gave no indication. She spoke only when necessary, her voice crisp and low, offering concise commands or sharp, insightful observations during tactical briefings. Her silence, once a source of suspicion, now seemed to deepen her mystique, an impenetrable veil that invited speculation. Every drill became a performance, not for an audience, but for her own exacting standards. On the firing range, her shots were consistently the tightest, the most accurate. The rhythmic crack of her rifle, followed by the satisfying thud of rounds hitting their mark in the distance, became the new benchmark. Soldiers would pause their own drills, ostensibly to adjust their gear or wipe sweat from their brows, but their eyes would covertly track Jade's movements, studying her stance, her breath control, the almost zen-like focus she brought to each shot. Her precision wasn't just skill, it seemed an extension of her very being, a silent testament to countless hours of brutal, unforgiving training. During endurance runs through the rugged, sun-baked hills surrounding the camp, Jade would set a blistering pace, maintaining it with an almost casual ease that belied the difficulty. She ran with a fluid, economical stride, her breathing steady and deep, while others gasped and struggled to keep up. She never broke stride, never faltered, never showed a single sign of fatigue, even as sweat plastered her uniform to her body. She was a machine of relentless efficiency, a physical embodiment of a higher echelon of military training. Her physical prowess was not about showing off, it was simply a given, an integral part of who she was. The men, once quick to judge, now found themselves humbled, their own perceived limits stretched by her sheer, undeniable capability. In the meticulously planned tactical exercises, Jade's instincts proved uncanny. Her solutions to complex scenarios were often unconventional, but undeniably effective. She saw angles others missed, anticipated enemy movements with chilling accuracy, and formulated counter-strategies that were both bold and devastatingly simple. She did not engage in lengthy discussions or debates. Instead, she would listen, absorb, then offer a single pithy observation that cut through the noise, illuminating the most direct path to victory. Her words, though few, carried the weight of profound experience, the undeniable authority of someone who had seen and done things far beyond the theoretical realm of the training ground. Officers, initially dismissive, now found themselves scribbling notes whenever she spoke, recognizing the distilled wisdom in her quiet contributions. The legend of the Black Warden tattoo continued to grow, fueled by the unspoken awe and the insatiable human need to understand the unknown. In the mess hall, during downtime in the barracks, the stories whispered became grander, more fantastic. Was she a lone wolf survivor of a decimated unit? Had she single-handedly taken down entire enemy compounds? The cryptic numbers circling the eagle fueled endless speculation. Were they mission dates, target coordinates, a code for a hidden message? No one dared to ask her directly. Her presence, her silence, her undeniable skill transformed her into a living myth, walking among them. Colonel Beckett, a man rigidly structured by protocol and tradition, found himself increasingly off balance. His initial contempt for Jade's presence had been replaced by a grudging respect, and then by something bordering on fascination. He couldn't deny her competence, it was staring him in the face in every metric of performance. He found himself watching her, trying to decipher the enigma that was Staff Sergeant Navarro. He'd seen plenty of highly skilled soldiers in his career, but none with her particular blend of silent intensity and profound capability. She didn't seek his approval, didn't need his validation, and that, in itself, was a challenge to his deeply ingrained sense of authority. He found himself inviting her to more and more high-level strategy briefings, initially out of a reluctant sense of duty, but increasingly out of a genuine, if unacknowledged, desire to hear her precise, insightful input. Master Sergeant Malcolm Reyes, for his part, remained a quiet anchor in Jade's new reality. He didn't intrude, didn't offer unsolicited advice, but his steady, knowing presence was a silent affirmation. He understood the weight of the Black Warden mark better than anyone else in the camp. He knew the immense solitude that came with belonging to such a unit, the burden of secrets carried, the unspoken sacrifices made. He would sometimes catch Jade's eye across a crowded room, and a brief, almost imperceptible nod would pass between them. A shared understanding of a world far beyond the confines of Camp Crimson Ridge, a silent acknowledgement of a bond forged in fire. He saw in her the same unwavering commitment, the same deep-seated purpose he recognized in himself. But for Jade, the external perceptions, the awe, the respect, were secondary. Her focus remained internal, tied to the true reason she had sought this unusual assignment. She had specifically requested a transfer to a conventional training base, a place seemingly antithetical to her specialized background. It was not, as many assumed, about personal redemption. There was no shame in her past, no need for forgiveness. She had always operated with a clear conscience, following a moral compass that guided her through the most complex and ethically ambiguous missions. Her motivation ran deeper. It was about legacy. The world was changing. The nature of warfare was evolving, becoming more complex, more nuanced, demanding leaders who were not just skilled in conventional combat, but who possessed an adaptability, an intuitive understanding of human nature, and an unwavering moral fortitude that transcended textbook tactics. Jade had seen firsthand the strengths and weaknesses of both conventional and specialized forces. She understood that the next generation of leaders needed to be forged differently to understand the true meaning of command, not just in the heat of battle, but in the quiet moments of decision, in the crucible of ethical dilemmas. She wasn't here to prove anything to the old guard. She was here to seek out the new, to identify those individuals, perhaps overlooked, perhaps underestimated, who possessed the raw potential to become truly exceptional leaders. She saw Camp Crimson Ridge not as a temporary assignment, but as a fertile ground for cultivation. She was looking for something beyond mere physical prowess or strategic acumen. She was looking for character, for resilience, for the quiet spark that distinguished a true leader from a mere commander. Her interactions with the soldiers, though limited in words, were intensely observant. She watched how they reacted under pressure, how they treated their subordinates, how they dealt with failure, how they handled success. She saw the flashes of arrogance, the moments of self-doubt, the quiet acts of loyalty, the unspoken rivalries. She was constantly assessing, sifting through the noise to find the signals, searching for the raw material that could be molded into something truly great. She paid particular attention to the struggling units, the sections deemed underperforming or problematic. There, she believed, lay the truest test of character. A soldier who excelled when everything was easy was one thing. A soldier who found their footing, who learned to lead amidst chaos and difficulty, was another entirely. She wasn't looking for perfection, she was looking for potential, for the quiet fire that could be ignited and fanned into a roaring flame. Jade often found herself observing Storm Section, a unit notorious for its disorganization and lack of cohesion. Their drills were sloppy, their morale low, and their leadership seemed ineffective. Other officers steered clear, labeling them a lost cause. But Jade saw something different. She saw misfits, yes, but also untapped energy, undirected frustration, and perhaps a raw hunger for direction. She saw the challenges they faced as opportunities, the very difficulties that could forge the strongest leaders. She watched Sergeant Cole Harlan, the nominal leader of Storm Section, Harlan was brash, confident to a fault, and initially deeply skeptical of Jade. He led with bluster, trying to motivate his men through shouting and intimidation, but it rarely yielded lasting results. Jade observed his underlying frustration, his genuine desire for his squad to succeed, even if his methods were flawed. She saw a leader in embryo, buried under layers of ingrained bad habits and a misunderstanding of true influence. She knew he would be a crucial element in her silent mission. The camp, still reeling from the shock of her tattoo, continued its operations, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Jade Navarro was no longer just a staff sergeant. She was an enigma, a legend, and a quiet, persistent force of change. She had not come to prove her past, but to secure the future. She had not come for redemption. She had come to build a legacy, one leader at a time. The weight of her silence, once a barrier, now invited a deeper kind of observation, a more profound understanding from those willing to truly see. And in that silent observation, the seeds of transformation were already beginning to sprout. The unveiling of Jade Navarro's Black Warden tattoo had fractured the rigid facade of Camp Crimson Ridge, replacing suspicion with a complex blend of awe and apprehension. Colonel Ronan Beckett, a man whose life revolved around predictable order, found his world irrevocably altered. He was no longer dealing with a mere staff sergeant. He was grappling with an enigma, a legend made flesh, and a force he increasingly found he could not simply control, but had to acknowledge. The shift in Beckett's demeanor was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but profound to those who knew him. He still maintained his stern, unyielding exterior, but the cold detachment he had initially displayed towards Jade had begun to thaw, replaced by a grudging respect that often manifested as irritation. He didn't trust her, not fully. His old-school instinct screamed caution, warned him against anything that deviated from the established norm. But he could no longer ignore her. Her performance in every drill, her unparalleled skill, the quiet authority she exuded, it was irrefutable. Reluctantly, almost against his own will, Beckett began to invite Jade into more high-level strategy briefings. These were the inner sanctum of command, where tactical plans were forged and critical decisions made. At first, he would only nod curtly in her direction when she entered, a silent acknowledgement rather than a welcome. He would often pose a question to his other officers, then, after listening to their responses, would pivot, his eyes settling on Jade. "Navarro? Your thoughts?" It wasn't an invitation for debate, but a demand for her unique perspective, and each time Jade delivered. Her contributions were always crisp, precise, and shockingly insightful. She didn't elaborate, didn't posture. Her words were like surgical strikes, cutting through convoluted discussions to reveal the most direct, effective solution. She would identify vulnerabilities in proposed strategies that others missed, foresee logistical bottlenecks before they arose, and suggest alternative approaches that, while unorthodox, often proved superior. Her mind worked on a different plane, honed by experiences that none of the conventional officers could fathom. Beckett found himself grudgingly relying on her input, even as his internal traditionalists bristled at the notion. Her logic was undeniable, her tactical acumen beyond question. He couldn't trust her past, but he couldn't ignore her present. While navigating the shifting dynamics with Beckett, Jade was simultaneously focusing her quiet energy on her true mission, cultivating new leadership. She had identified Storm Section as her primary target. This platoon was the camp's black sheep, a collection of misfits, underperformers, and disciplinary challenges. Their drills were sloppy, their morale abysmal, and their reputation for failure was well established. Other instructors had given up on them, viewing them as a lost cause, but Jade saw something else. She saw raw potential, misdirected energy, and a desperate need for genuine guidance. She began by observing them, not judging but analyzing. She watched their interactions, their individual strengths and weaknesses, the subtle currents of their internal dynamics. She saw the flashes of frustration in their eyes, the slumped shoulders that betrayed their low self-esteem. She saw Sergeant Cole Harlan, their nominal leader, attempting to inspire them with bluster and frustration, his own confidence slowly eroding under the weight of his squad's consistent underperformance. Harlan was a good soldier, fundamentally, but he was leading with outdated methods, trying to force compliance rather than inspire cohesion. Jade didn't issue grand declarations or demand immediate overhauls. Her approach was far more subtle, a quiet infiltration of their dysfunction. She started small, offering individual pointers during drills, demonstrating a technique with effortless grace that made complex movements seem simple. She corrected mistakes not with harsh reprimands, but with quiet, precise adjustments. Footing, she would murmur to a soldier struggling with a difficult climb and demonstrate the exact placement of her own boot. Breath, she would advise a shaking shooter, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos of the firing range. Her influence was like water seeping into cracks, slowly but relentlessly eroding the old, ineffective habits. She never raised her voice. She never showed frustration. Her patience was boundless, her expectations unyielding. She didn't coddle them, she challenged them, pushing them beyond what they believed were their limits, but always with a quiet confidence that implied she knew they could achieve it. She made them believe, not in her, but in themselves. Under her quiet guidance, Storm Section began to transform. Their sloppy movements became more synchronized, their disorganization giving way to a nascent cohesion. Harlan, initially resistant to her unofficial interventions, slowly began to observe her methods. He saw the tangible improvements in his men, the way they responded to her quiet authority. He watched as Jade, without overt effort, instilled a sense of purpose where only apathy had existed. His own leadership style, once predicated on shouting orders, began to shift. He started listening more, observing more, and emulating Jade's calm, deliberate approach. The change was not instantaneous, but it was undeniable, a steady, powerful current of improvement that flowed through Storm Section. They were still Storm Section, but now they were a storm brewing, gathering strength, not dissipating. Meanwhile, external forces began to stir, threatening to pull Jade away from her silent mission. An offer arrived, discreetly delivered by a high-ranking aide to General Hawthorne. It was an invitation to return to special operations, to lead a new experimental unit at Fort Beacon, a cutting-edge facility designed for the most elite and classified missions. It was the kind of offer that most operatives dreamed of, a direct path back to the shadowed world she had once inhabited. Jade considered it, but only briefly. Her decision was firm, immediate. She refused. The aide, surprised by her quick rejection, pressed for an explanation.
Staff Sergeant, this is a unique opportunity, a chance to shape the future of Special Forces.
Jade's gaze was steady. This is the real game, she stated, her voice low but resolute. Right here, where the next generation learns who they are, where the next wave of true leaders are forged, not just for the battlefield, but for the complex world beyond it. Her purpose was clear. She wasn't interested in leading another elite unit of already exceptional soldiers. She was here to cultivate the seeds of leadership in a different soil, to nurture the potential in those who might otherwise be overlooked. Her refusal, relayed back up the chain of command, caused a ripple of quiet surprise among the high-ranking officers aware of her true background. General Hawthorne, known for his shrewd understanding of human nature, merely nodded. He knew Jade well enough to understand that her motivations ran deeper than conventional ambition. He suspected she was playing a longer game, one with implications far beyond a single unit or a single mission. At the same time, another individual was taking an unhealthy interest in Jade's past. Miles Keane, a persistent military journalist with a reputation for digging up controversial stories, had caught wind of the whispers surrounding Staff Sergeant Navarro and her unusual transfer. He smelled a story, a potential scandal, a decorated special ops operative sidelined to a conventional training base. He believed there had to be a hidden reason, perhaps a disciplinary action, a past mistake, or a political maneuver. Keane was relentless. He started by making discreet inquiries, calling his contacts within military intelligence, trying to unearth any official record of disciplinary action, any hint of a blot on her perfect service record. He frequented the local bars outside Camp Crimson Ridge, listening to the gossip of off-duty soldiers, trying to piece together the fragments of the Black Warden rumors. He even attempted to secure an interview with Jade herself, sending formal requests through official channels, then resorting to more unconventional methods, trying to intercept her outside the base. Jade, however, was a master of stonewalling. She had spent years operating in the shadows, trained to deflect and disappear. She ignored his official requests. When Keane tried to approach her directly, she would either move past him with a serene, unreadable expression or meet his gaze with an intensity that brooked no further interaction. No comment, she would state, her voice flat, her eyes conveying a silent warning that discouraged any further prying. She gave him nothing, not a single emotional reaction, not a single revealing word. It infuriated Keane, but it also fueled his obsession. Her impenetrable silence only made him more convinced there was something significant to uncover. He continued to poke around, a persistent gnat buzzing around the periphery of her carefully constructed quiet. Despite Keane's persistence, Jade's focus remained laser-sharp on Camp Crimson Ridge. Her work with Storm Section intensified. She began to introduce more complex, integrated drills, forcing the squad to rely on each other, to communicate, to anticipate. She pushed them to their physical and mental limits, stripping away their old habits, forging new ones rooted in efficiency and mutual trust.
Sergeant Cole Harlan, initially resistant to her methods, had become an eager student.
He saw the tangible improvements in his men, the renewed sense of purpose that had replaced their former apathy. He watched how Jade, without ever raising her voice, could command absolute attention, could inspire his men to push harder, to learn faster, to perform better than they ever had before. He began to internalize her lessons, adapting his own leadership style. He learned to observe more, to speak less, to lead by example rather than by command. He learned the power of quiet confidence, the strength in unwavering expectation. Storm Section, once a burden, was becoming his pride. The transformation was not just external, it was internal. The soldiers of Storm Section, once cynical and defeated, began to walk with a new swagger. They held their heads higher, their uniforms were sharper, and their eyes held a newfound spark of determination. They weren't just performing better, they were feeling better about themselves. They had found a leader who believed in their potential, and in turn, they began to believe in their own. Jade observed this with a quiet satisfaction. This was the real game she spoke of. This was where the next generation truly learned who they were, not just as soldiers, but as individuals capable of leadership, resilience, and transformation. The silent fire she carried was not just an internal flame, it was a beacon, slowly but surely igniting a similar fire within the hearts of the men of Camp Crimson Ridge, particularly those in Storm Section. The ground was being laid, brick by quiet brick, for a legacy that would extend far beyond the parameters of any single mission or any single command. The seeds of true leadership, sown in silence, were beginning to take root. Understood. Here is part 5 of the story, written in a full voiceover style with a minimum of 2,300 words and no parenthetical descriptions. Part 5. The Public Test. The quiet transformation of Camp Crimson Ridge, spearheaded by Staff Sergeant Jade Navarro's unwavering presence, continued its subtle yet undeniable progression. The whispers surrounding her Black Warden tattoo had settled into a respectful hum, and the improvements in Storm Section under her silent tutelage were becoming too significant to ignore. Colonel Ronan Beckett, despite his ingrained skepticism, found himself grudgingly acknowledging her impact, a feeling that both irritated and intrigued him. He had never encountered a force quite like her. The daily rhythm of the camp, however, was abruptly interrupted by an unannounced arrival. One crisp morning, a sleek military helicopter descended onto the main landing pad, its rotor wash whipping dust and debris across the parade ground. From its belly emerged General Marcus Ellery, a figure of immense authority and a towering reputation. Ellery was more than just a 4-star general. He was a legend in his own right, a strategist whose tactical brilliance was matched only by his keen eye for leadership. He was also, significantly, Colonel Beckett's former mentor, a man whose judgment Beckett trusted implicitly and whose presence commanded instant, unreserved deference. General Ellery's visit was no mere courtesy call. It was a surprise base-wide inspection, a thorough audit designed to assess the operational readiness and leadership quality of Camp Crimson Ridge. His reputation for meticulous scrutiny preceded him. No detail escaped his notice. No weakness went unexamined. His piercing gaze, intelligent and discerning, swept over the assembled troops, his presence radiating an undeniable gravitas. The general moved through the camp with a swift, purposeful stride, accompanied by Beckett, whose usual rigid composure seemed a shade more strained under the weight of his former mentor's presence. They inspected barracks, reviewed training logs, and observed various units undergoing their drills. Ellery listened intently, asked probing questions, and offered crisp, sometimes disarmingly direct, assessments. As the day progressed, the inspection turned to the practical application of training. General Ellery requested a live tactical maneuver, a complex simulation designed to test coordination, responsiveness, and leadership under pressure. He specified that he wanted to see a unit that had recently shown significant improvement. Beckett, after a moment's hesitation, named Storm Section. The choice was telling. Only weeks ago, the idea of showcasing Storm Section to a 4-star general would have been unthinkable. Now it was a testament to the quiet revolution Jade had wrought. Jade led Storm Section onto the designated training ground. The atmosphere was charged. Every soldier knew the stakes. This was their chance to prove their newfound capabilities, not just to their commander, but to a living legend of the military. Sergeant Cole Harlan, the official leader of the platoon, stood tall, his initial bravado replaced by a quiet confidence earned through weeks of grueling, focused training under Jade's silent guidance. He deferred subtly to Jade, an unspoken acknowledgement of her true role in their transformation. The scenario was challenging, a simulated ambush in dense, unfamiliar terrain, requiring rapid assessment, coordinated counterattack, and efficient casualty extraction. As the exercise began, the initial chaos that had once plagued Storm Section was notably absent. They moved with a newfound fluidity, their actions synchronized, their communication crisp and concise. Jade, positioned strategically, moved with an almost phantom-like grace, anticipating every threat, every necessary adjustment. She offered precise, almost imperceptible hand signals, her eyes scanning the battlefield, directing the flow of the engagement with an intuitive understanding of the unfolding chaos. Harlan, meanwhile, called out commands with a newfound authority, his voice steady, his decisions quick and effective. He implemented the lessons Jade had instilled, delegating tasks efficiently, trusting his men, and adapting to the unexpected turns of the simulation. He was no longer just barking orders, he was leading, truly leading, with a clear vision and an unwavering calm. The misfits were performing like a highly trained, cohesive unit, executing complex maneuvers with a precision that stunned the observers. General Ellery watched with a rare, almost imperceptible nod of approval. His gaze, initially critical, softened into one of genuine interest as he observed Storm Section's seamless execution. He saw the individual improvements, the collective cohesion, and the undeniable influence of Jade Navarro, whose quiet command was evident in every fluid movement of the platoon. He understood that this level of transformation was not achieved through conventional means alone. As the maneuver concluded, flawlessly executed despite the pressure, a ripple of quiet admiration passed through the other observing officers. Storm Section, once the camp's embarrassment, now stood as a testament to effective training and renewed purpose. Later that afternoon, during a tactical debriefing in the main conference room, General Ellery presided. Colonel Beckett and his senior officers were present, reviewing the day's exercises. The general spoke with an air of satisfaction, commending the overall performance of Camp Crimson Ridge. Then, his eyes, sharp and intelligent, turned to Beckett. "Ronan," Ellery began, his voice calm but authoritative, "Storm Section's performance today was exceptional, a significant improvement from previous reports. Tell me, what was the catalyst for this transformation?" Beckett shifted, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He could take credit, but the honor felt hollow. He knew the true answer. He met Ellery's gaze. "General, the credit for Storm Section's turnaround belongs, in large part, to Staff Sergeant Navarro. Her direct involvement in their training has been instrumental." Ellery's gaze drifted to Jade, who sat quietly at the edge of the table, her expression as unreadable as ever. He had already noted her presence, her quiet observation during the previous briefings. Indeed, he mused, a knowing smile playing on his lips. He understood the implications of Beckett's admission. For the rigid colonel to credit a staff sergeant, especially one he had initially tried to dismiss, spoke volumes. Then the moment arrived. The hook payoff, the unexpected pivot that would cement Jade's place not just as a skilled operative, but as a recognized leader in a command that had once sought to diminish her. General Ellery leaned forward slightly, his voice cutting through the hushed room, directly addressing the assembled officers. "Let's hear it from Navarro." All eyes in the room snapped to Jade. The abruptness of the general's command, the directness of the invitation, left no room for pretense or evasion. The air crackled with anticipation. This was her moment, a public stage set by the highest authority to articulate the very essence of the quiet fire she had brought to Camp Crimson Ridge. Jade stood, her movements fluid and unhurried. Her uniform was still impeccable, her posture straight, but there was no stiffness, no theatricality. She didn't fidget, didn't hesitate. She simply met the gaze of General Ellery, then Colonel Beckett, then the other officers, her eyes conveying a quiet confidence that was entirely her own. "General, Sir Colonel," she began, her voice clear, calm, and resonant, carrying without effort to every corner of the room. Storm Section's transformation was not about imposing new tactics, but about redefining the foundational principles of teamwork and individual accountability. We focused on cultivating intuitive communication, ensuring that each soldier understood their precise role within the larger objective and, critically, trusting their comrades implicitly. She continued, her words concise and compelling, painting a vivid picture of the platoon's journey. We drilled relentlessly on adaptive problem-solving, teaching them not just to follow orders, but to anticipate, to react, and to innovate under pressure. We emphasized the power of the collective, demonstrating that the strength of the unit is always greater than the sum of its individual parts. And we instilled a belief in their own capabilities, fostering a sense of ownership over their performance and their progression. Her plan for future development was equally crisp and decisive. She outlined a phased approach to integrate advanced simulation training, focusing on real-time decision-making and rapid response scenarios. She proposed cross-training initiatives to enhance inter-squad cohesion and suggested a mentorship program where senior members of Storm Section would guide newer recruits, effectively replicating the cycle of transformation she had initiated. Her insights were practical, forward-thinking, and articulated with an undeniable authority born of deep experience and profound understanding. She spoke not just as a staff sergeant, but as a strategic thinker, a true leader. When she finished, the room remained silent for a beat, a collective processing of the depth and clarity of her presentation. General Ellery offered a slow, deliberate nod of approval, his eyes gleaming with recognition. Colonel Beckett, rigid as ever, still managed to convey a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of something akin to quiet pride, perhaps even relief. The other officers, initially surprised by the general's direct call-out, were now openly impressed. Jade had not just performed in the field, she had articulated her methodology with a precision and vision that few could match. Later that evening, in the quiet confines of his office, Colonel Beckett found himself reflecting on the day's events. General Ellery had left, his final words a quiet but powerful commendation for the state of Camp Crimson Ridge, and a subtle but unmistakable nod to the exceptional contributions of Staff Sergeant Navarro. Beckett poured himself a glass of water, his thoughts heavy. He walked to the window, staring out at the floodlit parade ground, now empty. The memory of Jade standing there, removing her blouse, the stark revelation of the Black Warden tattoo flashed in his mind. The shock, the instant re-evaluation, the dawning realization of who she truly was, it had been a moment of profound personal shift. He recalled his initial reaction, his deliberate attempt to humiliate her, to push her out, to reassert what he perceived as the natural order of his command. He remembered the transfer papers he had drafted in those early days, the quiet inquiries he had made to expedite her departure. The thought now seemed almost absurd, a relic of a past mindset he was slowly but surely shedding. With a deep sigh, a rare indulgence for the tightly controlled colonel, he admitted it to himself, privately, without a witness, without an audience. The words were a quiet confession, a profound acknowledgement of change. "I once tried to transfer her out," he murmured, his voice a low, rough whisper in the silent room. He paused, the weight of his own transformation settling upon him. "Now," he continued, the words carrying a newfound conviction, a deep, unwavering resolve, "now I would fight to keep her on this base." It was a complete capitulation, a full embrace of the truth he had tried so hard to deny. Jade Navarro was not just an exceptional soldier, she was an invaluable asset, a catalyst for positive change, a leader who inspired transformation not with overt commands, but with the quiet fire of her undeniable presence and unyielding purpose. The public test had been passed, not just by Storm Section, but by Beckett himself, his prejudices crumbling under the sheer force of Jade's quiet, transformative power. The legacy, without a name, was taking root. The ripple effect of Staff Sergeant Jade Navarro's presence had profoundly transformed Camp Crimson Ridge. Colonel Ronan Beckett's initial disdain had been utterly dismantled, replaced by a deep, almost reluctant admiration for her leadership. His private confession, the admission that he would now fight to keep her on his base, was a monumental shift for a man so steeped in tradition. The metamorphosis of Storm Section, from a dysfunctional mess to a high-performing unit, stood as irrefutable evidence of her quiet, yet immensely powerful influence. Yet, the currents of change in Jade's world were far from settled. In fact, they were accelerating. The call came in the form of an encrypted communique, a secure message that bypassed the usual chain of command, addressed directly to Colonel Beckett for immediate transmission to Staff Sergeant Navarro. It was a single, authoritative line, devoid of pleasantries. Staff Sergeant Navarro is requested to report to Fort Beacon, effective immediately, to lead a new experimental unit. General Hawthorne. The directive was clear, concise, and carried the undeniable weight of an order that was less an invitation and more a predestined next step in a much larger unspoken plan. Beckett himself delivered the message. He found Jade in the armory, meticulously inspecting a carbine, her focus absolute. He cleared his throat, a small, uncharacteristic sound of hesitation. "Navarro," he began, handing her the data pad. "This arrived for you." Jade took the pad, her movements fluid and unhurried. Her eyes scanned the brief text, and for a fleeting moment, a subtle shift in their depth was almost discernible, a shadow of introspection. But then it vanished, replaced by her usual placid calm. She simply nodded. "Understood," Sir Beckett lingered, a rare moment of uncertainty softening his rigid posture. "Navarro," he repeated, his voice lower, almost reflective. "Fort Beacon it's a unique posting, cutting edge, and General Hawthorne doesn't make requests like this lightly. This is a significant opportunity." He paused, looking out the armory door, then back at her. "Your work here with Storm Section, what you've achieved, it's been nothing short of extraordinary. You've changed this camp." There was genuine, unvarnished respect in his tone, a sentiment he would never have imagined himself expressing just weeks prior. He had wrestled with his own pride, his own deeply ingrained prejudices, and in that silent battle, Jade had emerged victorious, not through force, but through sheer, undeniable merit. Jade held his gaze, a hint of something akin to understanding in her dark eyes. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice a quiet acknowledgement of his sincerity. She felt the internal pull, the deep connection she had forged with the struggling soldiers of Camp Crimson Ridge, the satisfaction of seeing them find their footing, their purpose. To leave now felt like abandoning an unfinished tapestry, a garden she had just begun to cultivate. But she also understood the larger implications of Hawthorne's call. It was a new challenge, a vaster canvas for the legacy she was building. Her mission had always been about shaping the future, and this was clearly the next vital stage. It was time to grow leaders on a grander scale, to influence the very foundations of future military excellence, not merely to lead individual units. "I accept," she stated quietly, her decision made, unwavering. News of Staff Sergeant Navarro's impending transfer swept through Camp Crimson Ridge like a silent storm. The general mood was one of profound regret, particularly among the soldiers of Storm Section. They had found in her a leader, unlike any they had ever known, someone who had seen past their failures, their frustrations, their very labels as misfits, and ignited a fire they hadn't known they possessed. She had given them back their dignity, their purpose, and their pride. Sergeant Cole Harlan, who had experienced the most significant personal transformation, approached Jade during an evening training session. His initial brashness was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence and a deeply ingrained sense of responsibility. "Staff Sergeant," Harlan began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, carrying a note of genuine sadness. We hear you're leaving. Fort Beacon, sir, it's a big deal, but we'll miss your guidance. We won't forget what you taught us." He looked around at the rest of Storm's section, who stood quietly behind him, their uniforms sharper, their posture more confident, their expressions mirroring Harlan's sentiment. They were no longer just soldiers, they were Jade's soldiers, imbued with her quiet tenacity. Jade met Harlan's gaze, her eyes holding a rare softness. "Your work is not finished here, Sergeant Harlan," she said, her voice gentle but imbued with an unwavering authority that resonated deeply. "You have learned to lead. You have learned to build. Now you must continue to lead. For your men, for this camp, for every soldier who comes after you. This is your legacy." Her words were more than just an instruction. They were a solemn passing of the torch, a clear directive that their transformation was not dependent on her constant presence, but on their sustained commitment, their newly forged discipline, and their continued belief in themselves and each other. Her departure was set for the earliest light of dawn. The night before, a profound and utterly unplanned event unfolded, a silent, powerful testament to the impact Jade had made. Without any orders given, without a single command issued, the entire Storm section gathered in the pre-dawn darkness. They moved silently, purposefully, towards the most grueling obstacle course on the base, the infamous Night Viper. This treacherous sequence of ropes, walls, mud pits and barbed wire was designed to test every fiber of a soldier's strength and mental fortitude, rarely attempted outside of strict daylight training, and certainly never voluntarily. Under the faint glow of the moon and the distant camp lights, Storm section attacked the Night Viper. They moved as one cohesive, efficient unit, their movements fluid and practiced, a stark contrast to their early clumsy attempts. They helped each other over walls with practiced ease, spotted each other on ropes, and navigated the treacherous terrain with a precision and confidence that would have been unthinkable weeks prior. There was no shouting, no frustration, just the quiet rhythm of their breathing, the splashing of mud, the shared determination in their eyes. They completed the course not once, but twice, pushing themselves far beyond any expectation, not because they were told to, but because they needed to. It was their way of showing her that the fire she had ignited within them would continue to burn, strong and bright, long after she was gone. It was their silent, arduous salute. The next morning, before the sun had fully broken over the eastern hills, the entire base lined up on the main parade ground. It was an unofficial assembly, not mandated, yet every soldier was present, standing in silent formation. Even some of the officers who were not typically present for such informal farewells stood in the front ranks. Colonel Beckett stood at the front, his gaze fixed on the military transport vehicle waiting to take Jade away. He approached her, his posture ramrod straight, his expression solemn, a gravity to his demeanor that transcended mere military protocol. "Staff Sergeant Navarro," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed assembly, resonating with a depth of respect that had been hard-won, forged in the crucible of his own challenging transformation. "Your time at Camp Crimson Ridge, though regrettably brief, has been nothing short of transformative. You arrived under unusual circumstances, and you have, without question, left an indelible mark on this command, and on every soldier here." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the silent ranks of men, then back to Jade. "You showed us that true leadership isn't always about the loudest voice, or the clearest rank, or even the most decorated uniform. Sometimes it's about the quietest presence, the most unwavering resolve, and the undeniable force of character that inspires change from within. You never sought attention, yet you commanded it." He took a deep breath, the admission heavy with the weight of his own personal journey. "You have set a new standard here, a standard of excellence, of resilience and of selfless dedication. We are unequivocally better for your presence, and this camp will continue to thrive because of the seeds you have sown." Then, In a gesture that stunned everyone present, Colonel Beckett slowly raised his hand to his brow, delivering a crisp, perfectly executed salute. It was a powerful public acknowledgement of her worth, a complete reversal of his initial humiliating order. And as his hand came down, 180 soldiers, without a single spoken command, followed suit. A sea of salutes rose in unison. A silent, profound farewell from the men who had once looked upon her with disdain, with suspicion, and now saw in her a legend, a mentor, a true leader who had quietly reshaped their understanding of strength. Jade held their gaze, her eyes moving across their faces, acknowledging each salute with a quiet dignity. Her lips, usually set in a firm line, softened almost imperceptibly. She offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod to Colonel Beckett, a silent gesture of mutual respect that transcended their ranks and their past interactions. Then, with the same quiet command she had always possessed, she turned, ascended the steps of the transport vehicle, and disappeared inside. The vehicle rumbled to life, its engine a low growl in the pre-dawn stillness, turned and slowly made its way out of Camp Crimson Ridge, leaving behind a transformed landscape and a quiet, burning legacy that would endure long after her departure. At Fort Beacon, a facility designed for the future of military strategy, Jade began anew. The facilities were state-of-the-art, the technology cutting-edge, far removed from the more traditional, rugged environment of Crimson Ridge. The soldiers assigned to her new experimental unit were already exceptional, handpicked for their intelligence, their skill, and their potential. But Jade's approach was the same. No titles, no grand pronouncements about her past, no reliance on the rumors that surely preceded her from the moment she stepped off the transport. Just reset everything. She instilled the same core principles: silent observation, intuitive communication, radical adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of self-improvement. She was here to sculpt the next generation of truly elite leaders, not just for a specific mission, but for the evolving complexities of global security, for a future that demanded more than just brute force. Meanwhile, Miles Keane, the persistent military journalist, continued his relentless pursuit of Jade's story. Despite her steadfast stonewalling, despite the military's tight-lipped secrecy, the undeniable whispers, the profound transformation at Camp Crimson Ridge, and the sudden high-profile transfer to Fort Beacon provided him with enough compelling threads to weave a narrative. He couldn't get a direct quote, couldn't confirm the details of her Black Warden past through official channels, but the impact was simply too great to ignore. He sensed a story of quiet heroism, of profound influence that defied conventional reporting. He tirelessly gathered anonymous testimonies from soldiers she had impacted, discreetly interviewed officers who had witnessed her effect on Storm Section, and meticulously pieced together the fragments of the legend of the silent staff sergeant. He understood that the true power of her story wasn't in sensational details or explosive revelations, but in the quiet, profound way she operated, the unseen current that ignited change without fanfare. He decided that the story needed to be told, not as an exposé, but as an ode to a new kind of leadership. His article was published anonymously, choosing to focus on the phenomenon rather than the individual, titled simply, "The Silent Firebrand." It wasn't a scandalous exposé, it was a deeply respectful, almost reverent tribute. It spoke of a staff sergeant whose arrival stirred an entire camp, whose silent presence reshaped a failing unit, and whose true power lay not in a storied past, but in her unwavering ability to inspire leadership without a single boast, without a single explanation, only through the force of her being. The article, disseminated across military channels and then picked up by broader news outlets, went viral with astonishing speed. It resonated deeply with soldiers, with veterans, with anyone who understood that true influence often comes in the quietest, most unexpected forms. Jade Navarro remained nameless within the article, referred to only as the staff sergeant, the operative, the silent force. But everyone who read it, from the highest general to the newest recruit, knew exactly who it was about. Days later, at Fort Beacon, a small, unmarked package arrived for Jade. It was simple, unassuming, easily overlooked. Inside, nestled in a bed of dark velvet, was a single ancient coin. It was heavier than it looked, older than her own Black Warden coin, its edges worn smooth by time and countless hands. One side was heavily tarnished, the details obscured by age, but the other bore a clear, familiar engraving. An eagle diving with 3 arrows, the same powerful symbol that circled her own tattoo, and the same cryptic numbers that no one understood. Below it, etched in a different, more contemporary hand, were 5 simple words: "For the one who still carries the fire." Jade turned the coin over in her hand, her thumb tracing the faded lines of the eagle, the enduring symbol of a hidden legacy, a continuous lineage. It was a silent message from an unknown sender, a recognition from someone who understood intimately the path she walked. It was a confirmation that the flame she carried, the quiet fire she used to forge new leaders, was part of something far larger, a purpose that extended through generations, an unbroken chain of silent guardians. The legacy without a name continued, carried forward by the one who still held the fire. And so, our journey with Staff Sergeant Jade Navarro, the silent firebrand, reaches its conclusion. For now, we've walked alongside her from the moment she stepped onto Camp Crimson Ridge, facing the icy stares of an unwelcoming unit, to the profound, silent salute of a transformed command. Her story isn't just about overcoming obstacles, it's about the quiet revolution she ignited, not with grand speeches or overt displays of power, but through an unwavering commitment to excellence and an unshakable belief in the potential of others. Jade Navarro taught us that impact isn't always measured in medals pinned to a chest or in the thunderous roar of a battlefield victory. Sometimes the most profound victories are won in the quietest corners, within the hearts and minds of individuals. We saw her take a struggling unit, Storm Section, dismissed by many, forgotten by some, and through sheer silent force of will and a relentless dedication to their growth, transform them into a cohesive, high-performing force. She didn't seek the spotlight, she simply carried a fire within, a deep, abiding flame of purpose, and used it to ignite similar fires in those around her, shaping leaders not with words, but with her very being, her unwavering action, and her undeniable skill. This is the timeless power of true leadership, the rare ability to inspire deep-seated change, to build unyielding resilience, and to leave an indelible mark on the lives of others, a legacy that continues to burn long after you've moved on. Her story reminds us that often the most transformative forces in our world are the quietest, the most persistent, the ones that work patiently and without fanfare to cultivate greatness where others might only see failure. It's a powerful lesson in an often noisy world. Sometimes the strongest voice is found in silence. Here at Veteran Biker, we are passionate about bringing you these extraordinary stories, tales that highlight courage in the face of adversity, the power of personal transformation, and the enduring, resilient spirit of those who serve our nations and inspire us all. If Jade Navarro's journey resonated deeply with you, if her silent strength sparked something profound within you, then know that you'll find many more compelling narratives, real and imagined, waiting for you right here on our channel. Each story is a testament to the remarkable human spirit and the lessons learned in the crucible of challenge. What did you take away from Jade's incredible story? Did her silent strength inspire you to look for the quiet leaders in your own life? What does true leadership mean to you? We want to hear your thoughts, your reflections, and your personal insights. Share your perspectives and connect with our community in the comments section below. Your insights, your experiences, and your engagement are what truly fuel our mission here at Veteran Biker. Don't let the fire fade, not in your spirit and not on our screens. Hit that like button, subscribe to Veteran Biker, and join our growing community as we continue to explore these powerful, transformative tales of resilience and dedication. And be sure to check out the other powerful stories appearing on your screen now, each one offering a unique glimpse into the heart of courage. Until next time, ride safe, stay strong, and keep that fire burning brightly within you.